Have you ever noticed that no matter how many times you clear your throat, there's still that constant phlegmy feeling sitting in the back? For a lot of people, this isn't just an occasional irritation. It's a daily companion. And while it might seem like a small thing, just mucus, it's often a signal that something deeper is going on in the body. Here's the surprising part. Most people assume constant phlegm means they have a cold, or maybe allergies. But in reality, research shows that one of the most common causes of a persistently phlegmy throat isn't infection at all. It's the way your brain and body regulate your airway defenses and how lifestyle, diet, and even your stress levels hijack that system. Think of mucus as a protective shield. Your body produces about 1 to 1.5 liters of it every single day. You swallow most of it without even realizing. It lines and protects your respiratory tract, traps irritants, and even carries immune cells. But when production is off balance or clearance slows down, that's when you start to feel it build up. That constant lump, that urge to clear your throat. Now, why does this matter beyond the annoyance? Because persistent throat mucus can affect your breathing, your sleep, your vocal quality, and even your focus and mood. People underestimate how much the body and brain are connected here. A restless night of sleep due to airway irritation alters cortisol rhythms. Chronic inflammation in the throat primes your immune system to overreact to harmless stimuli. And even subtle breathing difficulties can change the oxygen flow that your brain relies on to regulate energy and emotional stability. So in this talk, we're going to explore the real science behind constant phlegm. We'll uncover 6 major causes you've probably never considered, all backed by research. More importantly, I'll give you practical tools, things you can adjust in your environment, diet, and daily habits to not only clear your throat, but optimize the systems of your body that keep it clear in the first place. By the end, you'll understand what's really happening inside you every time that phlegmy feeling shows up, and what you can do about it. One of the most overlooked causes of constant throat mucus is something called laryngopharyngeal reflux, or silent reflux. Unlike the classic acid reflux most people think of with burning in the chest, this version often has no heartburn at all. Instead, tiny amounts of stomach acid and digestive enzymes rise up just enough to irritate the back of the throat, the vocal cords, and the airway lining. Here's what the research shows. Studies from the American Academy of Otolaryngology note that up to half of people who complain of chronic throat clearing or mucus actually have silent reflux, not allergies or sinus problems. The irritation from even trace amounts of acid is enough to trigger your throat to produce more mucus as a protective barrier. Think of it this way. Your airway is like a security system. When acid sneaks up, it sets off the alarm. The body responds by flooding the area with mucus to neutralize and trap the irritant. It's a protective reflex. Smart in the short term. But if it happens every night, you wake up with that thick feeling in your throat, almost like glue you can't clear. What's happening in your brain when this occurs is fascinating. The vagus nerve, which links your gut and your throat, detects irritation and signals your brain stem. In response, the parasympathetic branch of your nervous system activates mucus production. In a sense, your brain is trying to coat the throat to protect it from damage. But the cost is that ongoing cycle of phlegm and throat clearing. Now here's where lifestyle and timing matter. Eating large meals late at night, lying down too soon after eating, or regularly consuming acidic or fatty foods increases the likelihood of reflux reaching the throat. Even mild dehydration can make the mucus thicker, because water helps keep those secretions thin and easier to swallow. A simple tool to apply is this. Finish your last meal at least 2 to 3 hours before lying down. This gives your stomach time to empty before gravity is no longer helping keep contents down. Another is to elevate the head of your bed slightly. Even a few inches can reduce nighttime reflux significantly, according to clinical sleep medicine studies. And during the day, try drinking enough water so that your urine stays pale yellow. Hydration doesn't just help digestion, it thins the mucus so your throat doesn't feel clogged. Have you noticed how your throat feels worse in the morning compared to the afternoon? That's often because silent reflux does most of its damage overnight. Recognizing that pattern is the first step toward breaking it. Another powerful driver of that constant phlegmy throat is low-grade inflammation from what you eat. Most people don't realize that diet can change the thickness and volume of mucus your body produces. not just in your stomach or gut, but all the way up in your airway. Here's what the research shows. Certain proteins, like those in dairy, can increase mucus production in sensitive individuals. Studies in the Journal of Allergy and Clinical Immunology have found that casein, the main protein in milk, can trigger the release of histamine in some people. Histamine is not only the chemical behind allergic reactions, it also stimulates mucus-producing cells. That's why some people notice their throat feels heavier or their voice feels coated after ice cream or cheese, even if they don't have a diagnosed allergy. It's not just dairy. Processed foods that are high in refined sugars and industrial oils drive systemic inflammation. Think of it like a low-grade fire in the body. Your immune system, sensing irritation, responds by activating goblet cells, the specialized cells in your airways that secrete mucus. Over time, this creates a baseline of extra phlegm that never really clears. Here's a useful analogy. Imagine your mucus system like windshield wipers. Under normal conditions, they run smoothly and only when needed. But when you fuel the body with irritating foods, it's like constantly spraying mud on the windshield. The wipers, your mucus system, are working overtime, and instead of clarity, you're left with streaks and smears. That's the throat clearing cycle. So, what's the practical tool here? Start experimenting with an elimination protocol for a short period, even just 10 to 14 days. Reduce or remove foods known to increase mucus for many people: dairy, heavily processed foods, and high-sugar snacks. Then, slowly reintroduce one at a time and notice how your throat responds. Pair this with anti-inflammatory foods like ginger, turmeric, leafy greens, and omega-3 rich sources such as salmon or flax seeds. These not only reduce systemic inflammation, but also help regulate immune cell activity in your respiratory tract. Another tip: be mindful of histamine-rich foods. Fermented items like wine, aged cheese, or cured meats are healthy for some, but in others they tip the balance toward overproduction of mucus. Awareness is key here. Your body's response is the best lab you have. And if this insight is resonating with you, if you're starting to connect the dots between what you eat and how your throat feels, consider subscribing to the channel. That way you won't miss the deeper tools we'll explore, because each one builds on the last to give you a full picture of how to optimize both your body and mind. One of the most common and often misdiagnosed causes of a phlegmy throat is postnasal drip. This is when mucus produced in your sinuses and nasal passages trickles down the back of your throat. It sounds simple, but what makes it fascinating is how the brain interprets those signals and how that interpretation can actually make the sensation worse. Your nasal passages are lined with tiny hair-like structures called cilia. Their job is to sweep mucus, dust, and microbes toward the throat so you can swallow them unconsciously. Under healthy conditions, you never notice this process. But when allergies, irritants, or infections ramp up mucus production, the volume overwhelms the system. Instead of being cleared silently, you feel it dripping, pooling, and sticking to your throat. Here's what the research shows. Studies in the annals of otology, rhinology, and laryngology point out that postnasal drip is one of the leading causes of chronic throat clearing. And what's more, your brainstem reflex circuits are tuned to amplify the sensation of something in the airway. Why? Because from an evolutionary perspective, even a small particle blocking the throat could be dangerous. So the system errs on the side of overreacting, making you feel an exaggerated lump that keeps you clearing your throat over and over. Think of it like a smoke alarm that's too sensitive. A little steam from the shower, and suddenly it's blaring. Your throat's sensory system works the same way under chronic postnasal drip. It signals danger even when nothing life-threatening is happening. Now, the practical side. If allergies are the driver, one of the best evidence-based tools is nasal irrigation, using a saline rinse or neti pot. Studies in the Cochrane database of systematic reviews have shown that daily saline irrigation reduces symptoms of postnasal drip and clears allergens from the nasal passages. Pair this with controlling indoor air quality, a HEPA filter in the bedroom, or simply keeping windows closed during high pollen seasons, and you reduce the triggers that overload your nasal system. Another powerful but simple tool is adjusting humidity. When the air is too dry, mucus becomes thick and sticky, making postnasal drip worse. Keeping indoor humidity between 40 to 50% helps cilia move mucus more effectively, preventing that constant flow down your throat. Have you noticed how your throat feels clearer after a hot shower? That's because steam thins mucus and temporarily restores cilia function. That same principle applies when you hydrate well and keep your environment moist enough for your airway to function optimally. It may surprise you, but one of the strongest influences on a constantly phlegmy throat isn't external at all. It's internal. It's the way your nervous system responds to stress. Here's the science. When you experience stress, whether from work deadlines, financial worry, or even low-grade daily frustrations, your body shifts into sympathetic nervous system dominance, the classic fight-or-flight mode. This activates hormones like cortisol and adrenaline, which don't just raise heart rate and sharpen attention, they also change how your respiratory tract functions. What happens in your brain is fascinating. The hypothalamus signals your adrenal glands to release cortisol, which in turn makes airway tissues more reactive. The vagus nerve, which we talked about earlier, becomes hypersensitive under stress. One result is that secretions in the throat thicken, and cilia that normally clear mucus become sluggish. Instead of mucus flowing smoothly, it gets stuck. That's why people under chronic stress often describe a persistent lump in the throat, a sensation called globus. Think of this as your body confusing emotional threat with physical threat. Your airway prepares as if smoke or toxins are present, even when the trigger is just a stressful email. The reflex is protective, but misplaced. Over time, this stress-driven response can lock you into a cycle. Stress makes mucus thicker, thicker mucus makes you clear your throat, constant throat clearing irritates tissues, irritation triggers more mucus. A self-perpetuating loop. So, how do you break it? One evidence-backed tool is physiological sighing. Research out of Stanford has shown that taking 2 quick inhales through the nose, followed by a long exhale through the mouth, rapidly calms the autonomic nervous system. Doing this for just 1 to 3 minutes can reduce vagal overactivation, thin secretions, and lower that stuck-in-the-throat feeling. Another tool is to simply time your stress regulation practices with your symptoms. For example, if you tend to feel phlegmy right before an important meeting, take a few slow nasal breaths with long exhales to preemptively settle the nervous system. That way, you reduce both the physical production of mucus and the mental amplification of the sensation. And if you're finding this connection between stress, the brain, and your throat enlightening, this is exactly the kind of mind-body science we explore here every week. So if you haven't already, hit subscribe and join this community. That way you won't miss the next set of tools we'll unpack. Because each insight builds your ability to optimize not just your health, but your focus and emotional balance too. Sometimes the reason your throat feels clogged with phlegm isn't inside your body at all. It's in the air you're breathing. The quality of your environment, humidity, pollutants, and even household irritants can have a massive impact on how much mucus your throat produces and how thick it feels. Here's the science. The lining of your airway is covered by a thin layer of fluid that allows mucus to move effectively. When the air is too dry, that layer evaporates. Mucus becomes thicker, stickier, and harder to clear. Studies in Chest Journal have shown that low humidity directly impairs mucociliary clearance, meaning your body literally can't sweep away irritants as efficiently. The result? That heavy throat sensation and more frequent clearing. Pollutants are another key player. Airborne particles from traffic, industrial emissions, or even indoor dust and cleaning chemicals can irritate the airway lining. When this happens, your immune system signals goblet cells to produce extra mucus as a defense. Think of it like your throat pulling up the drawbridge and filling the moat with water every time invaders approach. The problem is, if the invaders are constant, poor indoor air quality, cigarette smoke, or pollution, you end up with a chronically flooded moat. Even temperature swings matter. Rapidly moving from hot outdoor air to cold, air-conditioned indoor environments causes airway constriction, and the nervous system responds by thickening mucus as a buffer. This is one reason many people complain of throat irritation in office settings. Now let's talk about practical tools. First, hydration is non-negotiable. If you're even mildly dehydrated, mucus thickens and clings to the throat. A good guideline is to drink enough water so your urine is consistently pale yellow. Second, check your indoor air. If you live in a dry climate or use a lot of indoor heating or cooling, aim for 40 to 50% humidity in your living space. A simple humidifier can transform the way your throat feels within days. Third, reduce airborne irritants. Use a HEPA filter in your bedroom. Keep windows closed during high pollution hours and consider switching to non-toxic cleaning products if you notice throat irritation after scrubbing surfaces. Here's a quick experiment you can try. Pay attention to how your throat feels after spending time in different environments. A car ride with the windows open, a dusty room, or after sleeping with a fan blowing directly on your face. Often, simply noticing the connection between environment and throat symptoms is the first step to taking control. Sometimes, despite cleaning up diet, managing stress, and improving air quality, the phlegmy throat persists. That's when it's worth considering underlying health conditions that often go unnoticed but directly impact mucus production and airway sensitivity. One of the most common is asthma. Even mild undiagnosed asthma can cause inflammation of the airways. This inflammation activates goblet cells to produce more mucus as a protective layer. Unlike wheezing asthma attacks, this version may simply show up as chronic throat clearing, coughing, or phlegm that never seems to go away. Research in the Journal of Asthma highlights that airway hyperresponsiveness can exist without obvious shortness of breath, meaning phlegm may be the first and only clue. Another hidden factor is sleep apnea. When your airway partially collapses at night, tissues vibrate and irritate the lining of the throat. Your body responds by coating those tissues with more mucus to protect them. That's why many people with undiagnosed sleep apnea wake up with a sore throat, a raspy voice, or that heavy phlegm sensation. If you or someone you know snores loudly, feels unrefreshed in the morning, or has morning headaches, it's worth getting checked. Treating apnea not only reduces mucus, but also improves oxygen flow to the brain, energy levels, and long-term cardiovascular health. Endocrine factors matter as well. Conditions like hypothyroidism can slow metabolic processes, including mucus clearance. The result is thicker, stickier secretions. Even subtle thyroid dysfunction can change how your airway feels day to day. Here's the key insight. Mucus is often a messenger. It's not just a nuisance. It's your body trying to tell you something about the state of your respiratory system, your sleep, or even your hormones. So what's the tool here? If you've already tried the lifestyle and environmental adjustments we've discussed and still feel persistently phlegmy, it's worth consulting a physician to screen for asthma, sleep apnea, or thyroid issues. Simple tests, like spirometry for lung function or a sleep study, can uncover root causes that lifestyle adjustments alone can't solve. Think of it this way. Clearing your throat might feel like solving the problem in the moment, but if the signal keeps coming back, it's like your body pressing the same alarm button over and over. Addressing the root condition turns off the alarm entirely, giving you not just a clear throat, but better overall health. When you step back and look at everything we've covered, the picture becomes much clearer. That constant phlegmy throat that so many people wrestle with isn't random. It's your body speaking, sometimes quietly, sometimes persistently, about what's happening at multiple levels of your health. We started with silent reflux, where even tiny amounts of stomach acid trigger the vagus nerve and flood the throat with protective mucus. Then we explored diet-driven inflammation, showing how certain foods, dairy, processed sugars, histamine-rich items, can keep your immune system simmering and your goblet cells on high alert. We talked about postnasal drip and how the brain exaggerates even small amounts of mucus from the sinuses, making the sensation feel like a lump that never goes away. Then we uncovered how stress reshapes the nervous system, thickening secretions and locking you into a feedback loop of throat clearing and irritation. From there, we zoomed out to environmental irritants, from dry indoor air to pollutants, and how simple changes in humidity or filtration can completely shift your daily throat comfort. Finally, we looked at underlying conditions like asthma, sleep apnea, or thyroid dysfunction, showing that mucus isn't just an annoyance, but sometimes a red flag for something more significant. What this really means is that mucus is not the enemy. It's a signal. It's your body's attempt to protect, to coat, to defend. The problem isn't the mucus itself, it's the imbalance in the systems that produce and clear it. And when you start thinking of phlegm this way, not as a nuisance, but as information, you gain power. Here's a simple way to translate that into action. Pick one of the 6 areas we discussed and run an experiment with yourself this week. Maybe it's adjusting meal timing to reduce reflux. Maybe it's cutting back dairy or sugar for just 10 days to see what changes. Maybe it's trying saline nasal rinses, or simply making sure your bedroom humidity sits between 40 and 50%. Don't try to fix everything at once. Choose one lever, test it, and observe the result. Your nervous system learns through feedback. When you notice your throat feels clearer after even one small change, your brain logs that as valuable and motivation grows. The key is consistency, repeating small adjustments until your body recalibrates. And remember, the payoff is bigger than a clear throat. Improving mucus balance means better breathing, better sleep, calmer stress responses, and even sharper focus during the day. The throat is a gateway to the brain. When it's inflamed and irritated, your nervous system never fully relaxes. But when it's clear, your entire physiology shifts toward balance. So here's my challenge to you. Choose one of these tools and put it into practice today. Not tomorrow, not next week, today. Because each small step you take isn't just about clearing your throat. It's about reclaiming the subtle foundations of health that let you think clearer, breathe easier, and show up stronger in your life. And if this breakdown gave you a new way to understand what's going on in your body, I'd love for you to join this community. Hit like, drop a comment about which cause resonated most with you, and subscribe so we can keep building this mind-body toolkit together. Each week, we're diving into the kind of science that not only explains what's happening in your body, but gives you the tools to change it. Because when you understand the signals, you gain control. And when you gain control, you don't just clear your throat. You clear the path toward a healthier, sharper, more energized version of yourself.